Hello, how are you? I hope you're having a good one. I sure am. I welcome you to Karangahake Gorge, a connecting point between Paeroa and Waihi, or at least that's how most people see it nowadays. Though it's way more than that. This place has a rich history, a rich backdrop of Maori pas going back hundreds of years, more a couple hundreds of years than a few hundred years, and a long history of European mining. And that is what I want to get into today. I want to look at the rich gold mining history here, as well as just let you know about some of the more interesting places you can visit when you're coming through in Karangahake Gorge. So where I am now, it is the start of Karangahake Gorge, and from here you can either go for a walk through the tunnels or go for a bike ride along the mountainsides. And we'll end up in Waihi on the other end, where we'll be able to see some of the more impressive big mining equipment that's been left behind, though it has been dilapidated to the passage of time. One of the big highlights around here is the Windows Walk, where it's a 1 kilometer tunnel with windows cut out of it that lets you see out towards the river as well as towards the mountain range. Though unfortunately it's been shut out for a couple of years now due to geological issues, but hopefully it will be open again soon in a stable condition where people can enjoy the walk as well as the scenery in a safe way. And of course there's plenty of old gold mining sites, batteries as they're called, that you can explore and look at all the old ruins. They all have signs next to them, but I will go over some of the more interesting sites in this video. In 1875, Karangahake Gorge was the site to one of the biggest booming gold mining industry in all of New Zealand. And it all started when the Maori chiefs who were living in this area signed away their rights to the land to a figure named James Mackay, who is a little controversial about how he went about his negotiations. At that time, over 600 miners rushed over here to join in on the mining boom, though using the current then mercury amalgam process, the gold proved to be way too hard to mine out of the quartz in the mountain, and most of them left. And it wasn't until 1889 where the MacArthur Forest process, which used cyanide instead of mercury amalgam to extract gold, was tested on this very site that I'm standing at, which is the Crown Battery site. And it proved to be very, very successful, and it became the de facto gold extraction process for pretty much the entire country. These are the cyanide tanks that would have held the cyanide for the MacArthur Forest process to extract the gold and silver from the crushed quartz. These would have been many foot tall, and what remains of them is just a very shallow bit of the funnels underneath. Crown Battery became the biggest gold processing battery in all of Australasia, capable of crushing over 812 tons of sand to be extracted into gold per day. The Crown, Talisman and Woodstock batteries were some of the biggest batteries that hired in Karangahake Gorge, and they hired hundreds of miners as well as other engineers. It's surreal to think that this would have all been a giant monolithic structure with rock crushing machinery and cyanide beds for extracting gold. Something else, eh? And you gotta remember, what stands now is the remains. This would have been much bigger, much taller, and this was all done by hand. All they had access to was hydropower. This is where one of the stamping presses were. This is where the ore was brought, and there would have been rows of machines here giant machines that would have crushed the ores down into quartz sand so that it can be sent into the cyanide tanks. And by the early 1900s, these three batteries were putting out over half the gold of entire nations' gold output. Along with the mining industry, because back then people didn't have cars to do 2-hour commutes, the township of Karangahake itself grew exponentially. It had a school, a post office, even a hotel for people to stay in, which was huge. And by the early 1900s, it eventually hit around about 3,000 people, which even in this day and age in rural town New Zealand is a pretty big number. However, following World War I, due to lowering gold costs, the rise of cost of labor, as well as lowered output, most of the batteries were abandoned and the production had been stepped down. And many mines decided to close their operations and move on to somewhere else. And of course that meant that the population of Karangahake Gorge reduced as the mines shut down and there was less work to be found. And that brings us to now, where Karangahake Gorge currently only has about 300 people who are permanent residents, at only about 10% of its former glory. A large portion of Waikino village that used to be riverside here was swept away in a giant flood that overflew most of this river in 1981. Only a few remaining bits of the original village. There's a hotel right there. And as it stands now, again, it has now turned into a passageway from Waihi to Paeroa and vice versa. And only 10 kilometers away from Karangahake Gorge is Waihi, another gold mining town that's actually survived the ravages of time a little better than Karangahake Gorge. Waihi is home to Martha Mine, one of the richest and biggest gold and silver mines in the world. Operated from 1878 to 1952, and it produced over 12 million ounces and 30 million ounces of gold and silver respectively. The Martha Mine was owned and operated by the Waihi Mining Group, which was formed in 1892, and it became one of the richest and most influential New Zealand companies in the country. Not only did it own most of the land and buildings around Waihi, it also had its own bank, school, post office, and just about every infrastructure. The whole town itself was essentially owned by the mining company, which was rather common practice at the time, though it led to a bit of a downfall in terms of living conditions as well as workers' rights. The population of Waihi peaked at about 6,500 in 1908. However, it did face, like I said about the workers' rights, lots of social unrest, violence and death due to labor disputes as well as protesting. The Martha Mine closed in 1952 after more than 70 years of operation. It's now left behind this huge open pit that is now being used as a tourist attraction, and most of Waihi is privately owned now. The company itself has dissolved as far as I'm aware. You can take a walk or ride around the rim of the mine, as well as enter the mine and see how the operation was carried out. The Martha Mine is still relatively active today. It is owned by Oceana Gold's Waihi mining operation, who also operates Favona and the Corenso mine. And as you can see, the gold mining industry has had a huge impact on the socio-economical as well as the environment in the region. It contributed hugely to the development of infrastructure. The only reason this road went in is because of the mining operation, and of course the technology and the commerce around this area. However, from talking to some of the locals around here, it sounds like it's had major impacts on the environment, and there has been some talks of creating new mining pits, which they vehemently opposed, which they should. And I've left most of the sources I've used in the description below, but thank you very much for watching, and take care.